Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. We do this every Friday at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is on the 14th of September 2018, and it's episode 328. And I've got a really great panel here. We've got a great special guest, got Rachel Cherry. Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, hi, good morning. I'm Rachel Cherry. In the WordPress world, I am the director of WP Campus, where we focus on WordPress and its usages in higher education. So it's a lot of fun. We have a couple conferences. We have a really big Slack community. And otherwise, I'm a software engineer, and I do a lot of accessibility work, consulting and development, and higher ed consulting and development. So a little bit about me.
And she was formerly a Disney princess. There we go. There we go. So, John, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's John Locke, and I do SEO for manufacturing and industrial firms.
That's great. And you're not a Wix fan, are you?
It's not what I would choose, no.
No, there we go. Spencer, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Sure. Spencer Foreman from WPLaunchify.com, and I help people build profitable membership sites with marketing automation.
That's great. And Morton, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Not really.
Don't be like that.
Hi, I'm Morton, senior staff instructor with LinkedIn Learning. I'm super jet lagged.
It's a bit confusing, isn't it? Because they keep changing the name.
I'm extremely jet lagged. I just came back from Germany, from Smashing Con Freiburg. So I apologies in advance for being just generally confusing today.
It should be interesting. Thank you for joining us. Especially if you're flying.
Well, Rachel's here.
Yeah.
How can I not join? Rachel's, I just have to say, Rachel is one of the best people, and not in a Trump way, just in a real way.
I'm glad you made that clarification.
Right, thanks. And we've got Chris. Chris, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Sure. I'm Chris Badgett from Lifter LMS, which is a WordPress solution for creating, selling, and protecting online courses. And I have a podcast for course creators called LMS Cast.
That's great. So we're going to start with story one, which is WordPress 4.9.9 release focus item includes site health project and Gutenberg presentation. That's a title. And in the tradition of this panel, I'm going to let Rachel, a guest panelist, start with the first story. So what do you think of what's the highlights of 4.9.9 release, Rachel, to you?
Well, for me, accessibility. I mean, anytime we have a focus on that, it's amazing. I was just scanning this earlier, and my first initial thoughts was like, wow, this sounds like a lot for 4.9.9. But we were also talking about this a little bit in the accessibility team this week in Slack, and they were all really excited. But at this point, there's not any specific accessibility focus. Like they haven't, made tickets. They haven't said exactly what they want to do. So we'll all be curious to see what they land on. But yeah, this sounds like a lot to go in a month or two they want to have it done.
Yeah. What do you reckon, Morton?
First of all, Alain Schlesser is one of the other good people. the one of the leads there. He's he's a very advanced PHP developer, and I'm glad to see that some of the more some new people are coming into WordPress core as leads, because I think Alain especially will change the way that we think about a lot of things in WordPress in general. He's just a really, really skilled developer, and he's done some amazing WordCamp talks that are worth checking out. What really stands out to me in this thing has nothing to do with what goes in it. It has to do with the release schedule. Sorry, I blew out everyone's ears.
That was too bad, is it?
Let's see. It says release date or beta, Monday, October 22nd, which is a month and a week from now. Release candidate, Monday, October 29th, which is a week after. And then release date, Monday, November 5th. This is relevant because Monday, November 5th means if Gutenberg and 5.0 is going to be released in 2018, that gives Gutenberg and 5.0 a total of 7 weeks, which is extraordinarily short. It's actually shorter than the 4.9.9 release. So I'm gonna, just carefully put a lot of money into the pot that says we're not gonna see 5.0 this year, unless something like there's a parallel development thing happening between 4.9.9 and 5.0, which would also be unheard of because it would cause all sorts of other problems. So this is a pretty strong indicator that the myth of Gutenberg in 2018 is a myth.
No, did they tell you that they've got a secret parallel group that's been working on this with all the resources automatic? Did they share that with you?
Well, no, but I mean, there's a non-secret group. It's called the Gutenberg plugin. But I mean, the reality is, Matt said August. August is gone. We're now in September. There's like 800 million bugs in the Gutenberg repo. This thing 4.9.9 wasn't supposed to happen at all. I mean, think about it. It's 4.9.9. What comes after that? 4.9.10?
Yeah, of course. Obviously.
So, yeah. Accessibility focus is good. White screen of death focus is odd, but whatever.
What's that about? Do you know anything about that?
It's just preventing WordPress from going to white screen of death, which is a good idea. I mean, it's usually caused by broken plugins, but that normally gets caught by WordPress itself, or it's caused by terribly coded themes with PHP errors. And I don't know how you can avoid that because those are like direct clashes in code. Maybe Rachel knows. How do you, like, if you write that's what causes white screen of death. It's like you have a function that's called like get post in your theme, and then WordPress is like, there are two functions with the same name, and then you just get a white screen, right? So
yeah, generally they're fatal PHP errors.
So the only way you could do that would be like when you activate a theme for WordPress to scrub the theme and be like, no, before it activates it, right?
Well, actually, so I will say this. There's a cool plugin that just came out that some friends of mine built that they showed at WordCamp Orange County, and they won. Orange County has a big old plugin contest, Plugin Palooza or something, and they won it with this plugin, and I need to look it up. But that's pretty much what it... Plugin Detective, yeah, it's pretty cool. You should check it out. And what it does is it stops white screen of death, and it tells you like what's going on. But it isn't. Well, what it does is if you have a white screen of death, you run the plugin, and it finds it it goes through and like deactivates the plugin, and then it'll test to see if it's still there, and if it isn't, it'll go through and kind of like mark things out. I can't think of the phrase to describe that, but it's a cool plugin. It claims that it will basically remove white screens of death. Like if that happens, it does something on your site.
It is really cool. And actually, Chris had an interview with a developer. So if you go to Chris's podcast archive, when did you have? I forgot the gentleman's name actually, Chris. And when did you have that? Interview? When did you have that interview?
Nathan Tyler is his name, and it was a podcast about 2 months ago, and we also did an in-depth webinar with him about it.
Yeah, it's great. So if you want to learn all about that, I suggest. So Spencer, what did you think of this 4.9.9?
No, this is a rare instance where I really don't have anything to add other than what I just heard, which is I thought it was an interesting, optimistic schedule because of all the reasons that you're going to launch this major thing before the end of the year with 5 seconds left on the clock. Seems ill-conceived or unnecessarily rushed for some political reason if it actually happens. I don't see what's the difference if it makes it in 2018 or March of 19.
Yeah, I'll take you. Go on, Rachel.
I was just going to say this whole idea that it should be launched like crazy on a deadline is just silly because it's so important. It's such a huge thing. Like it should launch when it's ready. Like we shouldn't be rushing this. So I hope that they're not going to, I'm at loss for words this morning. I hope they're not going to sacrifice quality just for the sake of getting this out and making themselves look okay.
They would be strongly advised not to do that, Rachel, wouldn't they?
We would hope so.
I want to
reality.
I was thinking one thing to add about that new plugin. One of the things that all of us been around for a long time have to do whenever you see a white screen of death is to learn the trick of go FTP, SFTP, and like turn off plugins temporarily without doing it through the dashboard to see what's breaking. I was thinking if there's some way that kind of a feature makes it into the core of WordPress, that would be pretty neat, because the ability to selectively go down the list, like this is breaking it, this is breaking it, this is breaking it, without having to undo all your settings would be undeniably a smile maker.
Certainly would be. Totally. Does John or Chris, do you want to add anything to this, or should we go to story 2? Two. All right, let's go for story 2. Right. So that's from somebody I really admire, and I always read his stuff, and that's Rand Ruskin. And he did a presentation on the Inbound Conference 2018. And it's very entertaining and up to his normal standard of brought up some interesting points. Does anybody, I don't know if Spencer, if you had time to quickly look at the video, what were some of the key things that you thought of his presentation?
I think the slide deck is worth looking at. The video is fine, it's great, but the slide deck was useful. I think it just proves a point. No matter what size company you are, take a look at why you would even consider building something for an idea. And the essential thing that I took away from it, which is really ageless, timeless, is that you need to find a pain point. It's better that you find one particular thing to be known for, decide whether and why you need to take money, because it's easier to make money as a founder if you don't take all the way to the end of venture capital money. Every time you take a little more money from somebody, it's a little more you have to sell it for. But ultimately, I think in building his company, I watched his whole drama. It wasn't drama, it was his life, but the whole story of Moz and all of the other things that went along with it, and his admitted difficulties in dealing with some things that all of us have to be challenged by. But in doing this next time around, he seems to be at least very definitive, which I love. But even if it's a big company, be careful what you plan and what you wish for, because you can oftentimes have a very successful outcome if you just don't try to be those things that are all stereotypical that you're reading or hearing about in the news or by venture capitalists, blogs. Instead, you could just focus on solving one really important pain point for a group of people you care about. And I think that scales down nicely to even a solopreneur.
I thought another, I'm going to hand it over to Chris in a second, but I thought one of the highlights to me is that he kind of pointed out the kind of, I didn't totally agree with his reason why this has happened, but I thought it's quite insightful that he pointed out the amount of new companies that are starting in the US is drastically reducing, actually. In Silicon Valley, in the bubble of Silicon Valley, there's this idea that there's companies starting all over the place. But when you actually look at the reality, entrepreneurship, and actually starting small companies, and that is actually in quite a decline. And he's one of the main points that he was making, that he felt it was through the VC culture. I personally think it's really down to the monopolization of the American economy and Western economies in general, and it just isn't the oxygen for small to medium companies. So much of the economy is now dominated by monopolistic large companies. So, Chris, what do you thought of his presentation? What were some of the key points to you?
One of the big takeaways for me was when he talked about not expanding the offer too much. And there's a classic business book called Good to Great. And then one of the classic problems that companies make when they're starting up is they do something that's called a line extension, where you know, if you open a marketing agency or a web design agency and then you start doing all these things and SEO and it's just, you just do everything and you lose your focus. It's a classic fumble. And he mentioned that was part of what he saw happening and how Moz got overtaken. So that focus, I think, is really important. He also mentioned, which I thought was interesting, that if you have a good story and also around a good pain point or problem that you're solving, that there can be a lot of forgiveness in the marketplace or in your customer base when you make mistakes or when you fumble. And I think on a different side of saturation or monopolization of what you're talking about, I used to be kind of not really into branding or story and stuff like that. I was just more into like direct response, like, you know, just kind of that style of marketing. But as time goes on and everything gets so efficient, I think story becomes more and more important, and features are kind of table stakes these days. So we're kind of going back to the fundamentals of branding with story and knowing and liking and trusting people and brands. And I think that's just becoming even more important these days.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So what did you think of Morton? Because you made some really good points, but I thought the one thing that I didn't agree with him was, which is what I've already stated, why small businesses aren't being set up. You know, I know the fail rate is, don't know how many startup will fail, but it does seem to be a contraction of people starting things in some ways. And I think that's the strength of WordPress, because that's gone against the trend where one of the great things about WordPress is there's been a lot of startup people trying different things, isn't there?
I have nothing to say about this.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
I have not watched this video. That's why I don't want to say anything that's uninformed.
No, I totally understood. So, John, what did you think?
There's some excellent points that Rand made here, and he talked about his own experience at Moz a little bit, but mostly this was focusing on other businesses who have made this journey. One of the very first things that he says is, by focusing on one thing well, you're more likely to be memorable, and people can remember your product for a specific thing. Once you are absolutely established like that, you can expand. And I'll tell you a little story. There's a bakery in town here called Etere's. It's really popular here. But when the guy first came here, I worked there for a little while, for a few months. But when the guy first came here, all he made was croissants. It's literally all he made. And he became known for that. He executed on that one thing really well. And as he went on, now they do everything. They do everything from cakes, bread, you know, cookies, desserts. They serve lunch, dinner, whatever. It all started with just that one product. So that's a really important thing. Another thing he talked about near the end was, we celebrate venture capital. We celebrate like these businesses that try and go for a moonshot, but most of those end up on the trash heap of history. I think that we need to celebrate more sustainable businesses like Rand that are bootstrapped or, you know, get funding from friends and family or crowdfunded, but their chances of survival are much longer because the people investing aren't looking for a moonshot. They're looking for a sustainable business with a great story that, and he brought up a great point in here in the slide deck, as Spencer mentioned, when you're crafting a story that your product solves a problem for your customers, find the most emotional story that you can find. Solve those pain points, but you know, when you're telling the story of how your product does that, use emotional triggers instead of just benefits and features, because everybody has those. And as Chris mentioned, branding and the way that you're positioning yourself and the story that you're telling is what's going to be different. Apple and Samsung are virtually the same products, but Apple sells theirs for much, much more because they tell a different story. So that's it.
Yeah, I think it was kind of linked. I was listening to an episode of Mixergy, the podcast, and he had one of the founders of Unbound on, and I think he said that last year they did 20 million in net turnover, which is and they said that they have refused to do some of the things that Rand pointed out you shouldn't, and they're laser focused on what they their target audience and what they provide. So, but it's difficult, isn't it, Chris? Where do you take, because have you been tempted with your own company to add other features that are not really in the core of your core product, really?
A little bit, and I don't think I've necessarily executed on this perfectly. That being said, the solving the problem of learning and education, entrepreneurship is quite multifaceted.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things. So as an example, we built our own e-commerce engine. We do integrate with WooCommerce as well if people want to use that, but sometimes I question, should we have just integrated with Woo? But in many ways, what you can do with ours does more than what you can do with Woo, and then you need a bunch of other plugins to do it. But so should I be in the e-commerce business? Was that a mistake to go over there? But then I look at another company like something like Opt-in Monster. And sometimes I get like jealous in a fun way of like, okay, we're just getting leads. That is the sole purpose of this business, and it's through pop-ups. And that's just like a really simple, straightforward focus. So I admire that. When I look at a product that's like really well positioned and that does one thing really well and just puts the story, the brand, the feature set, the community all around this one thing. But yeah, those are my thoughts on it.
All right. What did you think, Rachel?
I did not. I'm with Morton. I'm on Team Morton on this one. I had no chance to watch it or even look at it. So
right,
I've been enjoying the conversation.
All right, that's great. I think we're going to go for our break, actually, folks. But before that, I want to talk about one of my great sponsors, and that's Kinster Hosting. And what Kinster is that they're just a better host than WP Engine. It's just end of the story, really. They're better value. They offer better technology, and they're just nicer people to deal with. And we host the WP-Tonic website on Kinster. It's been really just fantastic, a fantastic experience. I know all the top people that are in the Kinster family. They're big enough to have all the support and resources, but small enough to still care. And I know, like I say, I know all the top people in Kinster, and it's just been a pleasure to work with them and to have their support. And it's much appreciated, their support. So if you want to use Kinster yourself or use it for one of your clients, I would highly suggest that you go over to the Kinster site and find out more about them and what they can offer for you. So we're going to go for our break, and we'll be back in a minute. We're coming back. Got a great panel. Some of them have got jet lag, but there we go. You can't have it all, can you? Off with this. It's actually a Twitter feed, and it came from John, actually. And we could take this in multiple ways, actually. What is Wix really... What if Wix really is better than WordPress? Shock horror, no chance. So, John, what did you like about this Twitter feed, and what do you think? What do you want to present to the panel to start off the conversation?
So to set this up too, if anybody's seen that screenshot of Elon Musk with a big blunt on Joe Rogan's show, that's with that confused look on his face. That's the accompanying photo to this website.
I'm tempted to talk about his interview with the great man himself. I listened to it yesterday. It was a great conversation, actually, wasn't it? Did you listen to the actual podcast?
I have not listened to the actual podcast.
You really should, actually. Talk about being on a different plane of consciousness. And I don't mean that by the drug-induced element. I think he's there anyway. He doesn't need any assistance, really. Sorry, John.
Oh, anyway, but and basically, like, this tweet was just, it was basically just a really good joke. It was a really good meme. But here's the thought, I think it's important that we always examine what our beliefs are and challenge them always to see if they're still true. And, we always hear that WordPress is the best for SEO and it can't be topped. And definitely there's a lot of things that are good about it, but let's always look. I'm not saying Wix is better for SEO. I think the underlying code that gets output into the page is garbage. I don't think it's really conducive for SEO. And also I saw somebody else's Twitter feed that I follow. I can't think of their name directly right now, but I think they deal a lot in accessibility, and they were pointing out some stuff that I didn't really realize about Squarespace, that they make it difficult to do SEO by, certain things, like the alt text in images is by default the file name, and they make it really hard to change the alt tags. Accessibility tips are hidden in tooltips that you have to hover over, things of that nature. But I think it's good. Let's, always challenge our beliefs.
So, Rachel, in kind of accessibility is also kind of linked to SEO, because a really well-coded site that has good accessibility is also going to, when it comes to the Google spiders, it's just going to be loved by them. So they go in hand to hand, and I don't think it's not only an attack on Wix and Squarespace, but also maybe the code that's produced by a lot of these page builders. How do you see things in 2018? Is there a lot of people that don't realise they're producing a lot of junky code and it's not very accessible and not very SEO friendly?
Well, what I find funny when people say that like WordPress is really great at SEO is that it's not WordPress's job. It's really the theme developer's job. I mean, like, it's what produced on the front end. I mean, WordPress helps in having like default admin fields for some stuff that helps SEO, but it all depends on what theme you use. So you could build a custom theme that uses WordPress to power content, but if your theme, is producing front end code that's crap, then you may not be any better off than Wix or Squarespace. So it's really up to you and your theme and what you pick and what you go with. And then to fall back on theme developers, there's a lot of stuff out there. I mostly build custom themes, so I can't speak to a lot of like very specific theme shops or whatever. I've been working with Morton on WP Rig, a theme that we've been building, and that's been a big focus on us, is making sure it's accessible and performant and things like that. And I know there's some other themes that have come out that have been trying to focus on that too. So hopefully there is a transition moving, because you're right. If your theme is accessible, then it really does help a lot with SEO, because ultimately good accessibility is just good markup. Like, it's valid HTML. You're using things appropriately. You're not using dims when you should be using something more specific, like a button. You're not using spans for buttons, things like this. You're including headers appropriately. You're including valid, text alternatives to content that search engines can pick up. So hopefully, what I try to focus on is kind of awareness and education, so that we just keep moving forward. But, I would love to see the day where, like, if you're going to be in the theme repo, you have to be accessible. If you're going to be in the plugin repo, you have to be accessible. Plugins would be more complex to kind of judge on that behalf, but that's the future that I would like to get to, because until like the foundation or the community in general puts a big focus on this and actually kind of sets some actual standards and rules that everyone has to follow and not just core, then, we're not really going to make a whole lot of progress, and we're still going to see a lot of really, crappy sites. And then the struggle on top of that being that, like, we like to tout that WordPress is like 30 something whatever % of the internet, but, and then to coin a cheesy phrase, with great power comes great responsibility. If we're going to power all these websites, then what we do really matters, because we're setting a precedent and we're setting a foundation, and these things that we do really make a difference. So we need to be doing the right things. And right now accessibility is not a super priority. It's not enough of a priority. And so we definitely have a lot of room to go on that front.
Right, Spencer, what do you think? I don't know what you're going to say about this, actually.
Well, this one, I'm going to tell you my point, and then I'm going to tell you a story. I feel that we've reached a point of maturity in the web marketplace that really makes no difference to the end user, the people who are visiting websites, what is used to make the website. In fact, it has happened to me regularly that many of my clients and other consulting retainer clients have come to me and said, look, I'm really good at graphic design. I just am making these cafe things for my clients. Do I need WordPress or can I use Squarespace? And in most cases, I ask them a series of questions. Will they need these future higher powered capabilities? And if the answer is no, I oftentimes give them my blessing and I say, yes, use Squarespace because it's faster. But here's the story. A couple of years back in 2006, 7, 8 something, Costco started selling flat panel TVs from a company called Vizio, which is a Korean company. What was amazing was, I was a home builder before then, normally to get a flat panel display was thousands and thousands of dollars for a 50-inch display. This company started selling for $1,250, these flat panels that nobody knew the name, but it was unbelievable at the time that I could watch flat panel 720p, I think it was at the time. Now, that kept going and the market matured. You still can see at Costco, Samsung, crazy $10,000 displays, but a new company, TCL, is now at Costco for a 55-inch 4K with HDMI inputs and Roku, and it'll wash your dog for you on weekends, $299 for on sale, a 55-inch 4K TV. It's unbelievable, right? But I actually have it. The point is, the end user, the watcher of the TV, really doesn't give a rat's ass if I'm paying $299 and I get to watch 4K whatever from the internet. I don't need to spend $4,000 anymore. And in the same way, the visitors to a website will see the same pixels and never know what the code is. So if the person putting out the website feels that using Wix gets them to the place on time faster, and they're never going to need to do integration with marketing automation or WooCommerce or LMS or any of those key features, I say God bless you. Because ultimately WordPress's best benefit is one thing: to avoid using a platform solution to develop something more custom. I use WordPress where somebody would otherwise go off into, God forbid, Kartra or some other thing that has all these components that are necessary for their marketing business, but not necessarily just because of the CMS or the page building and so forth. And so for that, WordPress is still the best solution because it keeps you from being locked into somebody's cage with certain exceptions. But for just, most website stuff, even blogs and, a restaurant with a menu, Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, whatever floats your boat. I mean, just pick the one that's easiest for your end user. And I don't think WordPress has to own every piece of that market.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Walton?
You can get Costco to build your website.
Can you?
Yeah, they sell website services. They sell everything. Costco's like, oh, there's a product. We will have a version of this product. Eaves Throth's websites, moving services, an outboard motor for your boat. Of course we have this random shit lying around.
It's kind of linked to the previous story, isn't it? It's totally the opposite, isn't it?
It's a membership economy. That's the whole, like, if you're going to sell anything, sell everything, but make sure it's still that one purpose, which is come here.
They sell cars too. Like you can buy cars from Costco, but only like certain cars from certain.
No, I think that's just. I think that's just
like Costco sells, Volvos or something like that. It's like Costco sells one specific version of like the Ford F-150 this month. So if you want that particular car, you can get it with your Costco membership. That's neither here nor there. I think the Spencer is absolutely right. People don't care what they use as long as they get what they want, which is a website. And we've talked about this before. The web community has done an appalling job at explaining to people what the service is, like what kind of service you get when you pay for web design, that you're not getting a website built, you're getting all the research and the marketing, or like all the other knowledge that comes with the web designer. And these services like Wix and Weebly and all that, they sell this promise of you can do it yourself, which funnily enough is what WordPress does. Except WordPress is like, you can do it yourself. You have to do a bunch of extra work, but what you get is freedom. And then we don't do any more explanation around that. So like this idea that we have that, you know, our leg up in the marketplace is that we are free from control of corporate entities or whatever. People don't understand that because we don't market it. In fact, the only people who market it is Automatic, which is not that. That's an actual corporation, right? They ran an ad a couple of years ago that was saying exactly that. So people in general don't understand the value proposition of open source. In fact, they think open means dangerous and lethal and insecure because it has the word open in it. So I totally think that for a lot of people, Wix and Squarespace and everything is a better solution because all they want to do is muck around and build a web page and be done with it. And WordPress can't do that. If we want to beat them at that game, we're chasing the wrong horse. Like we should be saying, this is what makes WordPress special, and that's why you should pick WordPress. And if you don't want that, then go with one of these other solutions instead of saying, we're going to make ourselves look like that other thing, because they're not the same thing. And then stop chasing the 50% because that's just dumb. Not that I have a strong opinion about it or anything, but you know. Which
by the way, is strong, which is a strong argument feeding into the whole. We were sad you weren't here last week because the whole Gutenberg thing and the pivot all revolves really at the end of the day, like who are we exactly trying to be here? Because we're trying to compete against Squarespace and Wix and Weebly for ease of use by people that don't want to do higher things. Maybe that's the wrong target. Maybe it should be oriented towards people who want to build, you know, platform-like solutions, but not necessarily have to code it all. Who knows? But certainly you can't be both. You can't be like a one-page site builder. Oh, it's so easy. At the same time, you're trying to be an extensible platform for people that want to do real stuff.
Well, you've said, you know, I think that's been one of your main concerns, hasn't it, John? You know, the discussions we've had over the months, you felt that this whole move is aimed really at, I'm putting words in your mouth, but you're going to quickly correct me, aimed at the wrong target audience, really.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's not right or wrong. I mean, it's right for, you know, Automatic. They're targeting DIY builders, and that's why there's pushback from the people who help build WordPress, the agencies and developers who have advocated for it for the last, you know, dozen years. So
do you want to say that?
He was expecting some sort of full-on 45-minute presentation, I think.
No, you always get it right, but do you want to expand on that, Spencer?
No, I mean, I you know, it's interesting. This thing is going to work itself out, but I remember other metaphors like we talked about smartphones a couple of shows back, right? Like there was a time when people were migrating from, let's say, a flip phone to a Trio, BlackBerry, oh, the first iPhone. And there was this whole debate, which is the best way to go and what's the metaphor? And, oh, look, I have buttons, I don't. And then eventually everybody settled into, yeah, it's the shape of an iPhone with a touch screen. And now that conversation's gone. And I feel like by the time this whole thing settles out, we're going to be having holographic websites or, you know, devices attached to our heads. And this whole idea of how do you make pixels show up on a flat screen in front of your face is going to be a moot point because we're not going to be using that as the device anyway. I mean, that's the only thing I would say for long-term growth or strategy, whatever WordPress and Automatic decide to be, it should be something that is more about the end user's relationship and how they want to stay with this company because of the way they're treated, so that as the technologies and the way that websites or, you know, web stuff is used, they'll be loyal to the company. Our conversations about the Mr. Auditor of the WP forums treating people who have things to say has a lot more to do with their future than whether the pixels are this or that in 2018. Because I think nobody's going to forget the way they were treated during this whole transitional period. And, you know, the history is littered with examples of, you know, best company today, forgotten tomorrow.
I just can't resist the temptation, actually, Spence. I'm going to ask you a quick question that's got nothing to do with this conversation really, but there we go. Elon decision to have some recreational weed on a very popular podcast. Do you think he's no idiot? You know, he's one of the sharpest business intellectual kind of people around. He must have been aware of the message that he was broadcasting by doing that, or do you think he didn't think about it at all?
I think Elon Musk represents all that's good in humanity in our generation, insofar as he's an individual, as a contrarian, who is absolutely brilliant, absolutely doing things as a stated goal, which are for the good of humanity. The fact is, though, because of who he is and how he does that, I feel like he's got this desire to do things a certain way, which is put the weight of the world on his shoulders. And his personal life reflects that in his scheduling. And so I can't even imagine, because he's the same age as I am, how much he has to deal with. So I don't think that he did it without thinking, but what I do think he did is he made a very quick-witted calculation that he's in California, it's legal, it's provocative. He really, I think, has stated a desire to get himself out of the IPO public company situation where all of these short sellers and everybody else is trying to manipulate the business so he could just succeed. But at the same time, I can't imagine, because I've had my moments where I put my hand through the wall of my house, but he's probably got like times 10,000 every single day, where instead of it being recognized that, like, look what he's really doing for mankind. I mean, maybe not everything's perfect, but like literally higher goals than just making money for Twitter or something. I say cut the guy a break. But more importantly, if you substitute a blunt, whether it had marijuana in it or not, he was in California, it is legal. If he had a scotch or something at the end of the show, there wouldn't even be a conversation about it. But it's
he was drinking a lot of scotch as well. They were knocking.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, in other words, just because there may be marijuana. Well, in a year from now, everybody may wake up and decide that the medicinal and other reasons are good enough that now marijuana is legal, just like alcohol. And I could go off and on about how prohibition came about and why they changed it. So I just say, like, what's the conversation even about? If I was him, I'd be probably in my closet smoking marijuana all day long just to get the, sleep that I need or something.
I'm going to ask Morton. I'm going off track here a little, but I just couldn't resist it, because it was just fascinating to watch the interview and what they were discussing. It just kind of blew me away. But he must have been. Part of me thinks it was just a bid to reduce the share price so he could get it down to a level where he could just buy the whole company. I don't know. Any thoughts about it, Morton?
So the next story is an interesting article in the Smashing magazine called A Brief Guide About Competitive Analysis.
Yeah, all right.
I think this is probably one of the most overlooked components of the proper design process that we have in both web and other product development, to actually look carefully at what is happening between in the marketplace you're working in, which relates closely to all the other things we've been talking about so far. I'm sorry, did I take over your show from that asinine conversation about an idiot smoking on TV? I don't care. Like, October 17th.
I mean, you can call him anything, but he's not an idiot.
October 17th, pot will be legal in Canada. So all Canadian content, music, TV, movies, it's all going to be like baked, stoned out idiots. Bro, I'm so hungry. Like, that's going to be Canadian content from now on. That's, by the way, my birthday. I cannot tell you how many people have been threatening to show up with like pot cakes and all sorts of shit at my party, which I'm not having. So whatever. So anyway.
It'd be like SCTV back in the 70s. Remember?
Yes, exactly. So competitive analysis. If you're going to read one thing this weekend, it actually should be this article on Smashing Magazine, because competitive analysis is this thing that people often consider to be a thing you do. Like, oh yeah, I looked at the website of one of my competitors and I understand what they do, but that's not what it is and what it should be. And this article breaks down a procedure for doing competitive analysis that's really useful.
I thought it was really very
makes
good.
it into something actionable. I say all this because in my class, interaction design class, at the university I teach at, we spend a lot of time on these different design techniques. Like we just expose the students to all the different techniques. Like we build personas and use empathy maps and do competitive analysis and comparative analysis, and we do heuristic evaluations. Like we just make them go through all these things. And what you see when you start actually doing them rather than just thinking you are, is you learn so much about what your weaknesses and strengths are by just looking at what other people are doing. So and I think like this whole conversation about like Wix and WordPress and Squarespace and all these other things, one of the things that we're missing in that conversation is we don't have a proper competitive and comparative analysis between WordPress and other tools. We all talk about how WordPress is better or worse than them, but we don't actually ever spend the time to break that down. It would be really interesting to see someone do an unbiased analysis of all of these tools to see what are the strengths and weaknesses of each and where are there opportunities for advancement, because that's what you do, right? You look at everything that your competitors are doing, and then you say, what are the holes? Like my holes, like this is my product, this is what they are doing. What are the things they're doing that I can do better than what they are? And how can I fill in the gaps? And then also, where are the opportunities that are missed by all my competitors? If there are certain things that none of them are doing, that's probably where you want to specialize, because that's the thing that you can give that other people are not. So yeah, go read that. Yeah. Everything on Smashing Magazine is really good. Smashing is kind of turning into the nihilist apart. I'm not saying that because I spoke at their conference this week or anything, but you know.
But no, it seems to have ebbs and flows where the actual content. Of course, got Rachel Andrews. You know, I'm a great fan of Rachel. I'm going to try and get her on the round table. She's been on the show as the interview, but Rachel's a great lady. And thanks for putting me back on topic. I was jumping the shark there a little bit. I just couldn't resist it. But what did you reckon, Spencer, with Moulton? He's put me back on the right track again. But I thought it was a great article, actually. What did you think?
I'll answer it a different way. I'll say I find that there's different types of mindsets, and I happen to be in the non-analytical. Luke Stacy, who does a lot of our analytical work for my company, is of the other side. He's super analytical. He would agree fully with Morten, and I think that's a valid point, that I think if you're going to be competitive, you have to look at the data. But I think marketing people, and I fall into the marketing, psychology, sales, people side of things, we're non-analytical. We're intuitive gut, like people person. Analytical people have to look at the facts. So he often drags me back from my shiny ball syndrome. But a lot of times he's stuck in the data so much, and I'm like, no, it's about the people. It reminds me of Star Trek, you know, like Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock, right? You need the two of them to balance out. So I think this is definitely a tool that any company can benefit from, but I would caution anybody to avoid necessarily using that exclusively, because it goes against our first story, or Rand Fishkin's story, about people and storytelling and loyalty and relationships. You could have the most definitive analytics in the world and fail horribly because people just don't like you, don't care about you, and so forth.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Rachel? Got any thoughts?
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to read that one either.
Right, and let's finish off with John. Want to wrap it up? What do you think between the two camps, the analytical or the intuitive gut, or do you have to combine both together, really, John?
Yeah, I think you have to combine both. I mean, you can go completely, one way with design thinking and get all of the post-it notes and all this sort of thing. I mean, yeah, you're going to do competitive analysis if you're introducing a product or an app or a, service out in the marketplace. You're going to have to know what you're up against. But, you have to look at the data of what people are asking for. But I think in the end, you have to know the audience that you're trying to reach. And I think for me, the people that I work with, most of it's pretty targeted. If you're trying to have a unicorn type of app that's trying to reach like 11 billion people, might be a little bit different. But, you have to, it's just basically trying to figure out how is your product different from anybody else's, and then, positioning yourself in a way that's different than every other thing on the market. So
can I important.
Yes.
Competitive and comparative analysis and any kind of like quant analysis is not a one and done and only thing. I mean, a proper design process includes both the soft stuff that Spencer was talking about and the hard analytical stuff. If you go in one direction or the other, you're making a huge mistake because you're missing out on data. Like, this is one of the things that I think a lot of people simply don't know because they haven't worked in large design teams, is that the only way that you can really get where you want to go is by throwing all the different types of methodologies at it at the same time. You take the best pieces of different types of techniques to get the most data. Like, I've worked with designers who are very quant focused, like quantitative focused, so they do a lot of, you know, spreadsheets and shit. And I've worked with lots of intuitive designers that just work off what they think looks good and it just feels right and everything. And it's only when you really get them to work together that you truly get something special. So yes to everything Spencer said, yes to everything I said, put it all together, learn all the techniques and find which techniques give you the best tools for the current job you're using.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that. Yeah, on to probably the next and last story. How to use your website to attract millennials. I thought it was a great title, actually. And good.
I believe it's called clickbait. Very effective for attracting millennials.
It got me to look at it, and it comes from Web Dev Studios. I know it's one of their writers, but at least it comes from Web Dev Studios, and always got a lot of time for them. So I don't know to start. Rachel, did you have time to have a quick musey of this one, or did this one escape you as well?
I did have a chance to read over this one, and I mean, yeah, it's just, I don't know. I didn't really get much out of it. It kind of seems like it was just pointing out the obvious, but I guess I'm kind of borderline millennial. But I did enjoy, one part that jumped out at me was where they said that millennials are known for expecting transparency, which I thought was interesting to point out, that there does seem to be, the last few years, more pushes for, knowing what in the world companies are doing online, and like with all the Facebook and the Twitter stuff, and like the recent Twitter stuff with Alex Jones and all the pushback on that, even though that wasn't, really millennials in the government questioning them, which also makes me think of all the funny, questions at these like Senate hearings that they were asking like Zuckerberg and stuff about like basically how the internet works, and they clearly had no idea, which was really funny, but not in an actual haha way. But yeah, so other than that, it was just, talking about how they're on their phones a lot. And so ultimately it was just more about, but that's kind of everyone. Everyone's is on their phone a lot.
Yeah, I was in two minds with it. Yeah, I was in two minds with it, Rachel. I thought this is a load of shit, really. And basically, I know why we do it, but why? I'm going to ask Spence. I'm going to put this to you, Spence. What is it about the human condition why we want to put people into these finite groups, millennials, Generation X, and then we put other groups in? Because it's fundamentally a load. It's a shorthand. I know why we do it, and I'm just as guilty as anybody, Spencer. But fundamentally, it's just a heap of shit, really, isn't it?
Well, like, let me tell you, if you want to talk to a group of millennials, you probably should be a millennial, because
I refuse to talk. I know where you're coming from, but I will not do it.
No, you know what I'm saying?
Stop.
I just will not do it.
Okay, so here's the definitive. There's a person who's very well known, who is a millennial and does very well. I'm 51, 52 this year, so I feel like an old fart, but I'm going to say,
well, it could be worse. You could be
hold on. Conscious choice. Conscious choice. I have teenage boys and I have my peers. Conscious choice. I do not think that I have the capability, even though I could sell ice cream to somebody in Alaska, I do not think I have the capability to attract millennials to my products and services. I feel like I can sell anything to anybody of my age group or older, and I feel like I can maybe figure out what my kids are doing, but I can't figure out what the hell the priorities are of these millennial groups. So I'm not answering your question, but I am saying this article overlooks, I think the most important thing is, why do you want to attract millennials? And most people who are not millennials should not attract them, because it's like trying to figure out why the raccoon is in your garbage can. I mean, if you're not a raccoon, you're never going to figure it out. That's it.
I have to leave in like 1 second. So first of all, I think there's one millennial in the room right now, and that's Rachel. I'm guessing that you're like at least 2 years younger than me, which would put you into that category. The reality is the people you're talking about, Spencer, are not millennials. They're the next generation, which are the digital natives, like the people who were born after the internet was actually a thing that everyone had access to, which are a completely different species of humans. That article is clickbait garbage and has no actual value, because all it says is millennials like things like transparency and everything. That is not something that millennials want at all. It just plays into this concept that millennials are these people who are totally different. They're different, but not in the way that's described there. And there are a lot of pieces of that article where I'm like, I read it and I go, no, that's not actually how. Like that is factually wrong and weird. I feel like the author read a bunch of articles about millennials and then wrote some summary article about it. That said, if you're wondering why Ciara was a coach on World of Dance last week, the reason is because she has a new album out, or at least a new single that was released today, because that's what I do now. I give you updates on music industry news every day before I
Where's
leave.
Eminem today?
The end.
I pretty much only follow you on Twitter for your dancing comments.
This world embarks, mate.
Okay. Thank you all. I have to leave.
Thanks, Morgan.
Have a meeting.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Morton.
Bye. Yeah, I just don't get it. I just really, really don't get it in some ways. But I know where you're coming from, Spence. I've had some conversation where somebody's come up and said, "Hey, bro," and I said, "I'm not your bro, mate."
Hey, bro.
Bro, I'm not your mate, bro. I'm a geezer from North London, and calling me a bro isn't going to go down too well. I get away with it because actually a lot of Americans like me to insult them. Actually, they start laughing, especially
you become your parents. I mean, this is not like anything I ever aspired to, but what you understand is you become your parents, and you remember when you were looking at your parents the way that I'm looking at my kids or my younger potential prospective clients. And I say, I get why I'm so weird and different. So I've given up trying to be that uncool, weird uncle that's selling stuff to the younger generation. And I say, you know who I look cool and smart to? My peers and the older people. And I suppose the market's diminishing, but then I can maybe relate to the kids that I have's age. And that's the bottom line. The bottom line is this is how it's always been back in the 50s with rock and roll, and probably turn of the century, those uncool people driving around, wagons instead of cars. That's just the way it is. Nobody who's 50 is going to get an audience of 30-year-olds. And even 30-year-olds aren't going to get an audience, apparently, of 20s or teens, because there's not a teenager alive today that's on Facebook. They're going to not be caught dead on Facebook. For the same reasons that, those uncool college kids and my parents are on there. So the article is just funny, because why do you want to attract anybody? It's because you can actually make a sale with them or a relationship with them, and that's just not going to happen unless you're inventing the software that they don't know you're 50 years old.
I mean, ultimately, what this...
You make me feel very depressed, Spence.
You're one of the olds.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing, because you know what? You remember that guy from CD Baby? Sorry about that, Rach. I didn't mean to step on you. But remember CD Baby's founder, having a brain fart for a second.
Oh, Derek Sivers.
What was his name?
Derek Sivers.
Derek Sivers. His big thing was hell yes, right? And it's a decision process whereby, he did a lot of cool, interesting things, but he says, people ask me to do stuff all the time. He's like, if I don't just get excited and say hell yes, I say hell no. And I think that's the thing. There's a big world out there, 6.5 billion people online or something like that. I don't know, however. Pick the people you want to deal with, and then don't worry about the millennials or whatever these kids are.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here, and I'm just gonna say that all these articles that I see, well, why would you want to attract millennials? Because obviously they're killing malls, they're killing mortgages, they eat avocado toast, all these dumb ass articles. It's no different than any other generation that's ever existed, guys. I mean, it's like get off my lawn. And back in my day, I mean, honestly, like millennials are not even the youngest demographic around anymore. So it's all just like buzzwords and crap like that. I mean, in my mind. Look, me and my wife, our kids are basically, they're in their 20s, right? That's millennial, right? The tail end. So there you go. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer from back in the day. The three things that I took out of this article could really apply to any demographic, any generational group, not just millennials. The three things that I got out of it were, hey, they use their phone a lot. My in-laws use their phone a lot. They're boomers. I mean, they're on their phone all day long. So have a mobile-friendly site and you'll be fine. Hey, millennials, they want personalized and authentic content. Don't we all? Whatever demographic or whatever target audience that you're trying to hit, make sure you have stories that resonate with them, imagery of people that, fit into that group or, look like them or, are in the same age group or whatever it is. And use influencers if you are into influencer marketing, target people that, they watch or listen to. And basically social media, and that's common sense. If you want to be a brand, you got to be on social media as well, because that's how a lot of people get their information. And sad to say, that's the newspaper for a lot of people these days. It's either Facebook or Twitter or something else. That's how they get information. So those things apply not just to millennials, they apply to any demographic, any age group, from people just born to geezers and the boomers that are 1 foot in the grave. So there you go.
I'm going to let Rachel have the last word. She started off this conversation. Got any thoughts of what we just discussed, Rachel?
Well, I mean, yeah, he just touched on pretty much what I want to say. That most of this, any of the actual good stuff in this article is just kind of like general how to make your website good, and to pretty much talk to anyone, be transparent and genuine, make sure that your website's accessible for all kinds of devices, mostly phones, things like that. And all the good meat in that was just kind of like just general good tips.
It was a good title, wasn't it? But,
people like to be on their phones. People like to see genuine websites. Like, people don't want to be lied to. People don't want to be, bamboozled or whatever word you want to use. And, if you
quite agree with that, actually, Rachel. I think a sizable part of the population wants to be lied to all the time, actually.
That's a whole nother podcast.
But that's
a whole other conversation to get into.
Right, I think it's been a great. couple of the panelists left early. I don't know if it was through. I think it was through total boredom and jet lag. But there we go. But the hardcores remained. Rachel, how can people find you and learn more about you and what you're up to, Rachel? What's the best ways?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter a lot, Bama Designer, and then BamaDesigner.com is like my homepage where you can find all my links and everything, and you can learn about WP Campus, and you can see where I'm speaking and things like that.
And Rachel's a really smart lady, and I always listen to her, and I do follow her stuff as well. Spencer, how can people learn more about you, what you're up to?
Right. If you have any questions about how to handle or make a profitable WordPress membership site or the business around it, you can find me at WPLaunchify.com, and we can have a nice roadmap consultation.
There we go. A nice little chat with Spencer. Sorry, John. Oh dear. John, how can people find out more about
hello,
you?
fellow kids. Anyway, you can find me at my website, which is lockdownseo.com. Also, if you're on YouTube, check out my YouTube channel. We're publishing new SEO tips for manufacturing companies each and every week. Just go on YouTube, hashtag #LockdownSEO. You'll find us. How do the fine people get a hold of you, Jonathan?
It's really, I'm all over the internet, really, like a rash that you don't want, really. We do 2 podcasts, the WP-Tonic show, one focus on helping you build a successful course online. We do that on Wednesdays, and then we have this great fun Friday show with the crazy host. And if you want to go to the WP-Tonic site, we've got a lot of content about helping you build a successful course, and with WordPress, hopefully. It's combining education and WordPress is a bit of a passion for me. So we've got a load of content, and you can find me on. I've been cutting back on the social media recently. I've been having a little bit of break, but I think I rejuvenated, and I will be entering the social media a bit more in the coming months. We'll see you next week, folks, where we're going to have a fantastic panel and hopefully a fantastic discussion like this week. We see you soon, folks. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Peace.